It was supposed to be a celebration. Lights, music, children waving in the cold. A Christmas parade. November 21st, 2021. Waukesha, Wisconsin. Families lined the streets, smiling, recording, living a moment that should have been safe. And then, a red SUV appeared. At first, it didn't seem wrong. Just another vehicle. But it didn't slow down. It didn't stop. It accelerated, straight into the crowd. Screams replaced music. Panic replaced joy. People ran. Some didn't have time. And this is where it gets worse. Because this wasn't a quick impact. It kept going. Through dancers. Through families. Through children. The sound of the parade turned into something unrecognizable. Sirens. Crying. Chaos. Witnesses would later say, it didn't feel real. Like watching something your brain refuses to accept. Because how does something like this happen, in a place like this? And then, the SUV disappeared down the street, leaving behind something no one was prepared for. Because within minutes, it became clear, this wasn't an accident. So let me ask you, what goes through someone's mind, to drive into a crowd like that? Because soon, we find out who was behind the wheel, and what he did next, makes this even more disturbing. The vehicle was gone. But the damage, everywhere. Emergency responders flooded the scene. Victims, families searching, phones ringing with no answers. And this is where it gets worse. Because while chaos filled the streets, the man responsible didn't stay. He ran. The driver was later identified as Darrell Brooks. And what he did next? Chilling. He didn't turn himself in. He didn't call for help. He showed up at a stranger's house, knocking on the door, calm, asking to come inside. As if nothing had happened. Think about that. Moments after driving through a crowd, he was trying to blend in, hide, disappear. But the truth was already catching up. Because witnesses had seen the vehicle, police had the description, and the city was on lockdown. Meanwhile, the reality of what happened was unfolding. Lives lost, dozens injured, families destroyed in seconds. And still, he said nothing. No immediate explanation, no urgency, just distance. And that's what investigators noticed first. Not panic, but detachment. So now the question became, was this intentional? Or was there something else behind it? Because in a bit, the investigation reveals disturbing details about what led up to that moment. And it changes everything. At first, people wanted an explanation. Something that made sense. An accident. A medical emergency. Anything. But that's not what investigators found. And this is where it gets worse. Because evidence showed, he didn't accidentally drive into that parade. He avoided barriers, drove around police, stayed on course, through people. That's not confusion, that's direction. Witness after witness described the same thing. No hesitation, no attempt to stop. And then came the interrogation. Darrell Brooks sat there, calm, detached, at times, almost irritated, as if the questions were the problem, not what had happened. Let that sink in. Investigators pressed him, trying to understand why. But the answers didn't match the reality, and as more details came out, the weight of the situation became undeniable. This wasn't random chaos. It was a deliberate act that left irreversible damage, and the community was left trying to process something that felt impossible. A Christmas parade turned into a crime scene. So let me ask you, how do you even begin to explain something like this? Because later, the trial begins, and what unfolds in that courtroom is something no one expected. The courtroom was tense, heavy, because this wasn't just a case. It was a community demanding answers. And this is where it gets worse. Because Darrell Brooks didn't act like most defendants. He represented himself. And what followed was chaotic. Interruptions, arguments, outbursts. At times, it didn't feel real. But for the victims' families, it was painfully real. They had to sit there, listen, watch, relive everything, while the man responsible showed little remorse. And that's what stayed with people. Not just what he did, but how he acted after. Witnesses testified. Evidence was shown. The timeline made clear. There was no confusion left. No misunderstanding. Just the truth. And in the end, the verdict came. Guilty. On multiple counts. A moment that brought some form of justice. But not closure. Because nothing can undo what happened that night. Nothing can give those families their lives back. And maybe that's the hardest part. Because this case isn't just about one act. It's about how quickly everything can change. One moment, a celebration. The next, something you can never forget. So before you scroll, I want your honest opinion. Do you think justice like this is ever enough? Or are some actions too devastating to ever truly be answered?